The interview process for the Mets to hire their next manager will end today when Buck Showalter meets with Steve Cohen, Sandy Alderson, and Billy Epler. The question is, who is going to land the job? Who is the best fit for this job? I'm going to discuss all of that on today's episode of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Locked On Mets is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Now, on today's show, I'm going to break down the latest when it comes to the Mets search for a new manager. As we've known for a while now, they're down to three candidates: Matt Quatraro, Joe Espada, and Buck Showalter. In the first segment today, I'll talk about Quatraro and Espada. These are the younger, more analytically driven managers the Mets could look to hire, more of a new age hire, as opposed to Buck Showalter, where you are going for the veteran. I'll talk about Buck more in the second segment. And then finally, in the last segment, I'll break down which manager would be the best fit to run the New York Mets next season. Before we get to any of that, though, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing about the Mets at justbaseball.com. So you look at Matt Quatraro, and he has 18 years of coaching experience. So it's not like you're hiring some spring chicken. He doesn't have any managerial experience, but he has coached for a very long time. This is someone who has worked under Terry Francona. Most recently, he's been the bench coach for the Tampa Bay Rays under Kevin Cash, who's widely regarded as one of the best managers in baseball. Part of that team right in Tampa that's so cutting edge with the analytics and how they went on such a small payroll. Everyone is trying to poach coaches and executives. Everyone just wants a little bit of that Rays magic, right? That's why the Mets were interested in some executives that came from Tampa, did not ultimately land one. This is their chance to poach someone from that organization that knows a lot of the trade secrets of how things were operated on that bench as the bench coach. So he's a good hire. And I think the bottom line that we're going to get to with all of these guys, I really don't think the Mets can go wrong here. I really don't. I think Matt Quatraro is qualified. I think Joe Espada is an interesting choice that's been atop these manager lists for some time now. The next hot name to land a job. He's been up for so many. This would be a hire that would be received well around the game. I think all three of these hires have some merit. But if you look at Quatraro and what he brings to the table, he also has a hitting pedigree. That's how he first kind of made a name for himself as a coach, being an assistant hitting coach, working as someone that would help out, early on in the minor leagues, then eventually assistant hitting coach at the big league level, first base coach. He's done it all on a big league bench. He's done it all when it comes to player development. He knows how to talk to players. He's a former player himself. He was a catcher. We always talk about how catchers make good managers. So look, there's really nothing I could point to that would tell me that Matt Quatraro is a bad hire. I think the only thing you could maybe be concerned about is how is he going to handle the media. That is an unknown. He'd be going from no media coverage in Tampa, and also when you're a bench coach, no one's really talking to you anyway, to suddenly being the manager of a team with the payroll that could have, go up to $250, $275 million. Who knows how high that payroll could climb, maybe even $300 million. And so there's going to be a lot of star power, and he's going to have to answer the bell and be the face of the team in a lot of ways. We know that is really a big part of this job nowadays. It is standing up front and kind of owning everyone else's mistakes. And I think that is a tough thing to bear for these managers. And especially now with the analytics departments having such a heavy weight in the decision making, sometimes you're going to stand up there and have to defend the math that you didn't come up with. You're basically taking the blame for somebody else's work if it doesn't pan out the way you think it's going to, because the numbers don't always pan out that way. So that's my one concern with Quatraro, is how does he handle the media? But overall, my bottom line again is that all of these hires would be good ones. And if you look at Joe Espada, it's a very similar type of hire, a little bit younger than Quatraro. Quatraro's 48, Espada's 45, but both have worked for a very long time in baseball. Both have been coaching for a very long time. As I already mentioned, Espada has been that hot candidate for a really long time. Both of these guys also up for the job in Oakland. And what's nice to see is the Mets have first priority here, which obviously you think they should as the team with this star-studded roster, but you know how things work. I mean, we just went through that executive search where it seemed like everyone was declining the opportunity to work for the Mets. So this is a nice thing to see the Mets be prioritized with these two managerial candidates. And with Joe Espada, I think this is a hire that would be widely regarded around the sport. Everyone would really, champion the Mets for being bold enough to not hire Buck Showalter, which seems like the slam dunk, and go with Joe Espada because he has been that perceived next hot manager for such a long time, working in Houston, where they also are very analytically driven. I really don't have any knocks on either of these guys. I mean, like I said, the media thing, a question with both of them because they would be rookie managers. And there has been that quote thrown around that Steve Cohen doesn't want people learning on his dime. So maybe that would lead him to Buck Showalter. But ultimately, when you look at both of these candidates, they're extremely qualified. I don't know what happens on a big league bench. I never sat on a bench. I don't know. I can't tell you. I don't have any relationships inside the game with people directly who know Joe Espada or Matt Quatraro, where I could sit here and pretend like I know what these guys, what their character is or what they're going to bring to the table. And I think some of the people out there who can make these grandstands about which manager is best without really having all that information, you're just basically going based off of what you hear, and that's fine. But overall, I think that the people who are making these decisions right now, Sandy Alderson, Billy Apple, Steve Cohen, they know a lot more than I do. So whatever decision they make, since they have three highly qualified candidates, I'll be happy with it. And you just hope that they make the right decision and that manager can take the Mets to the next level in 2022. And maybe the best option to do that is the most experienced option, and that is Buck Showalter. I'll talk about him more in just a minute. This holiday season, grab the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar or even better than a candy bar, and that is Built Bar, which is filled with so much holiday goodness, rich with decadent flavor, covered in chocolate, but amazingly low in calories, sugar, net carbs, and fat, but high in protein, so you get the best of both worlds. Delicious and healthy. There's so many flavors to choose from, whether it's the raspberry bar, mint brownie, cherry, double chocolate, my personal favorite, cookies and cream. Built Bar will give you that extra fuel you need to bust down those mall doors and battle all the holiday shoppers. Or if you're standing in an endless shopping line, Built Bar will give you that extra something you need to keep you going. So throw one in your jacket or purse. You never know when you're going to need it. If you want to try Built Bar today, go to built.com, use the promo code LOCK15, and you'll get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, so let's talk about Buck Showalter, who is getting last licks when it comes to the interview process. He will meet with Steve Cohen today on Friday. Matt Quatraro met with them on Tuesday, and Joe Espada met with them on Thursday. So Buck gets the chance to make the last impression. He has won a lot of jobs in the past, so I would not count him out at all to blow everyone away and be named the Mets' next manager. When you look at the pedigree, the resume, we all know who Buck Showalter is, right? Has managed in New York. Is going to handle the media fine. He's not going to be in over his head at all like some rookie managers could be. And that is all very attractive. And I think if Steve Cohen owned SNY, not that that would really change his decision, but that would even be another reason to hire Buck because Buck's the best TV of these three guys. Like he's the one that's going to have the quotes at the end of the games that people are going to latch on to. He is the star manager when it comes to these three candidates, someone that has a name that carries a lot of weight. And I do think that stuff is important to Steve Cohen. Steve Cohen is a baseball fan. I'm not thinking he's going to get, starstruck by Buck Showalter, but he is going to have a certain admiration for someone who has managed in the game for a really long time, that managed in New York. All that stuff is going to come into play. and they're also the same age. So I just see in this interview process, Buck Showalter maybe getting along with Steve Cohen better than these other two candidates. And that could go a really long way because, again, I think Steve Cohen is absolutely the one with the final say here. I don't think Billy Epler is really the one making this hire. I'm sure he's going to put in his 2 cents. They're going to all work together as a collaboration here. But at the end of the day, Steve Cohen is writing the checks. And that is why I still think Buck Showalter is probably the guy for this job. I do want to go through some numbers that Tim Britton of The Athletic pointed out in his latest article, where he made a case for each of these managers. And there's all this talk about Buck Showalter and his previous success or lack thereof when it comes to winning a championship. But what Tim Britton points out is he looked at the 500 games before and 500 games after Buck Showalter came into all these different managerial jobs. So with the Yankees, in the 500 games before Buck got there, they had a 438 winning percentage. In the 500 games with Buck, they had a 526 winning percentage. With the Texas Rangers, 446 prior to Buck, 490 after Buck. With the Orioles, 388 prior to Buck, 522 with Buck, and then after Buck, they've been an absolute disaster. Burton also pointed out that when it comes to an expansion franchise, Buck Showalter was more successful with the Arizona Diamondbacks than anyone else was before that. As far as winning percentage in the first 3 seasons of an expansion team, Buck Showalter is the only manager that has a winning percentage over 500. I will also note, though, that he had Randy Johnson in his prime for the second or the second and third year of his tenure in Arizona. And Randy Johnson was the runaway Cy Young each of those seasons. Was unbelievable. And I think that is something that still gets overlooked. Is the players still win the games? We always talk about, oh, Buck Showalter. When he left, these teams won championships. I'm not sure if I mentioned this on this podcast before. I know I tweeted it out at one point, but what do you think was the biggest reason the Yankees won a World Series right after Buck Showalter left? Was it that they changed and Joe Torre came in and took that job? Or is it maybe that Derek Jeter debuted? you know, I think that at times we forget all the different elements that come into winning it all. And it's catching lightning in the bottle. It's having the luck on your side in October. There's so many things that come into play. I don't think that because Buck Showalter hasn't won a World Series, he's a bad manager. Just like I don't think Dusty Baker is a bad manager because he hasn't won a World Series. I think that these are experienced baseball men that are going to come into your clubhouse. They're going to immediately have respect of everybody in the room, and they're going to create a winning culture. Now, whether they are the highest ceiling type of managerial hire where Joe Espada maybe is some baseball savant that we don't even know about. He's this genius that knows analytics inside and out. Is going to take the Mets to another level. He's going to be so great. He's the next AJ Hinch, or if Matt Quatraro is the next Kevin Cash. We don't know that. But when it comes to the floor of these three candidates, Buck Showalter has the highest floor. And when you're trying to win now and you have so much money invested in this team, if you're going to hand the keys off of this Cadillac to somebody, Buck Showalter seems like the logical choice, but maybe the logical choice isn't the best choice. And that's what I want to talk about in just a minute. Which of these three managerial hires do I think is the best fit to take the Mets to the next level? We'll discuss that in just a minute. BetOnline has you covered all season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as the football season continues to march towards the playoffs. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action this season. Head to their new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit just by using the promo code Locked On. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on your favorite sports. Bet online, where the game starts. All right, so we have discussed all three of the finalists to land the Mets job today. And as I already mentioned, I think all of them would be good hires. I don't think the Mets can really go wrong here. I really appreciate how this process played out as compared to the search for a GM, where at first the Mets were looking for a president and a GM. Then all of a sudden it was just a GM and everyone was pulling out of the running for the job. And the Mets seemed like a laughingstock. This process for a manager has gone much smoother. It has been a clear vision as far as a longer list of candidates the Mets interviewed. They did their due diligence. They limited the field. They found 3 candidates that I think are great hires. And now they're deciding the best of the 3. And also having that respect that, like I already mentioned, they're giving this priority right now over Oakland, that other spot with the managerial vacancy, because this is a better job and it's seen as a better job. So all of that I think is great for the Mets. And I don't think that any of us from the media side, any pundit, any fan could possibly know which hire is best. Like, who am I to say that Buck Showalter is clearly better than Joe Espada? I've never spoken to Joe Espada. I don't know. The one thing I would say at this stage is I think Matt Quatraro would be the most disappointing of the 3 hires to me, not because he's not qualified, but just because he's the name that came out of nowhere. Joe Espada has been that hot managerial candidate for so long. And also, it does make a lot of sense the fact that he is also Puerto Rican. He got his experience managing in the Puerto Rican Winter League. He was part of the staff on the 2017 World Baseball Classic team that had Francisco Lindor, Edwin Diaz, and Seth Lugo. So it's very easy to sell that notion that Joe Espada is the best manager to maybe get the best out of Francisco Lindor, who still should be your best position player overall. So all of that makes a lot of sense to me. I think that Joe Espada hire would probably get the analytically driven fan, the analytically driven experts most excited. I think the Mets would be champion for hiring Joe Espada, for having maybe the courage to go that route as opposed to just taking the safer option with Buck Showalter. So for me, it comes down to Joe Espada or Buck Showalter, only because I've heard of Joe Espada for longer. He's been up for more of these managerial jobs. But again, I don't know if he's really any better than Matt Quatraro. It's just a name that to me has a little more weight to it than Matt Quatraro. But again, any of these hires would be good. When it comes to the Buck Showalter hire, the reason why I have started to lean that way when I talked to Pat Ragazzo, I think that was last week, as I've done my reading on what's going on here and I've dove into Buck Showalter's career a little bit more, is because I just want to see the Mets make the playoffs. And I did my whole show yesterday, which I'm sure some of you probably didn't like me saying the Mets shouldn't be all in to win a World Series. But if you really understood what I was trying to say there, is that instead of looking towards World Series or bust, the Mets should be focusing all of their efforts right now on the regular season and making it to the playoffs. Winning the division, that is the first step. Every single day, you want to strive for a championship. I don't think that changes the way the players operate. But to get to a championship, to get to a World Series, you have to go through the marathon that's a 162 game season where a bunch of guys are going to get hurt. Your entire 40-man roster will have to be utilized, and you have to find a way to win baseball games. And Buck Showalter has seen it all. And I believe of the 3 candidates, he has the best background to ensure a playoff berth with this team. Because I don't know if he's ever jumped into a situation where his team has been this good right when he gets the job. And with that, with his experience, I would expect the Mets to be well above 500 the whole year. I would expect they would never get too far down. If they did hit a skid, he would have the tricks of the trade to know how to get his team out of their head, to get them comfortable, to get them loose. The Mets this year felt like a team that was just crippled by the pressure. That's what it felt like to me from day one. There was these ridiculous World Series expectations on the Mets, which they're going to have again this year. And I think the pressure of that weighed on a Pete Alonso, weighed on a Michael Conforto, weighed on a Jeff McNeil, these younger guys, weighed on Francisco Lindor with the added weight of the $341 million contract. And that entire lineup basically sucked for the first 2 months of the season, really all year. But early on, just atrocious. The Mets won a lot of one-run games. Jacob deGrom was amazing. They get first place. And then ultimately their warts show up big time in the second half when DeGrom was out, when Lindor was out. Mets fall off a cliff. I think that Buck Showalter, because of his experience, would do a better job than any of these candidates at weathering the storms of a 162 game season. And because of that, because of my motivations as a fan of just wanting to see the Mets make the playoffs more than anything, see them break their playoff drought, see them earn some respect so that who knows, maybe next off season when a David Stearns comes aboard or could come aboard, you had this respectability and you could go to another level. I just think that you have to have a good season potentially before you have a great season. And the Mets have a much better chance at having a good season with Buck Showalter than anyone else. Where I could see a rookie manager like Matt Quatraro come in here and also feel that pressure of I'm a first-time manager with a team with a $300 million payroll. I was just in Tampa with a $70 million payroll. And now suddenly I'm in charge of this team. We just started 5-10. The media is ripping me. And I could just see things crumbling a lot quicker under one of those rookie managers as opposed to someone like Buck Showalter who could keep the team loose under those circumstances and keep them focused on their primary goal, which is winning each day because you have to just stack day over day over day to eventually get to a point where you can win a division and then compete in the playoffs to try to win it all. We'll see, though. As I've already said multiple times, there is not a hire at this point that would disappoint me. I would be a little bit more excited about Buck or Joe Espada than Quatraro. But regardless of where the Mets go here, this process has gone so much smoother than the executive search. They've landed on three candidates that are supremely qualified, and the Mets should be in good hands next season, regardless of which hire they decide to make. Anyway, though, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q and handicapping expert Lee Sterling. Get your daily picks, blowout specials, wrong team favorite picks, and Lee Sterling's lock of the day by following Locked On Bets wherever you get podcasts.